What's going on, summoners? Welcome back to another Pro Guides Wild Rift video. I'm Kangas, and today we're showing you something that you probably haven't seen before, a tier list for runes, including keystones and all the minor ones. We've been getting some questions in our Discord about which runes are the best, so we're hoping that this one helps you all out. Hit that sub button, and let's get right into it. So let's start off the OP keystones with our all-time favorite, Conqueror. This rune has been the default rune most champions go to when they're not forced to take any matchup-specific runes that would skew the matchup in their favor. This rune is just bonkers, and it's even been receiving nerfs here and there, but still reigns supreme. Especially on champions that utilize both auto attacks and spells alike, this rune gains insane value as you're able to instantly stack it up. A primary example of this would be Riven. Weaving auto attacks with their first ability is enough to get to 5 stacks almost instantly, if you do the animation cancels properly. And keep in mind, every stat grants bonus adaptive force, and once we're done stacking it up, we gain some sweet extra damage. Absolutely deadly. A new rune that's just been released is Phase Rush. For now, it's kind of going under everyone's radar, but this rune has obscene potential. Any matchup that was super dangerous to fight into can now be played completely different. Like, think of Gragas and Darius. Previously, this matchup was really annoying for the Gragas as it forced him to primarily farm with his barrel roll. With the power of Phase Rush though, Gragas can use his full combo and run off into the sunset without risking his life. In addition to that, it adds so much more general survivability when it gets into the later stages of the game. Stuck in a bad situation? Well, quickly combo an enemy and run away with the extra movement speed, while of course utilizing your emotes just to tilt them a little bit more. Another major change has come to the support runes. Aerie was the only real option for enchanters outside of a few instances where an enchanter was able to run Aftershock into very scary matchups. However, with patch 2.3, we've gotten our hands on a reworked Font of Life. It's a great tool that even scales with your own HP and ability power, making it a powerful asset in fights. You can basically run it on any enchanter of your choice, unless you determine that the extra healing will provide less benefit for the team than just a more potent shield. Let's take Lulu for example. Her primary job is to keep one hyper carry alive while denying the enemy as well as possible. Consequently, playing into a team that has inherent healing reduction or is sure to itemize it will lessen the value of Font of Life. However, the extra shielding from Aerie might just make the difference as the game goes on, so make sure that you choose wisely. And before we continue with today's video, I want to remind everybody to check out the description below for a link to join our Discord. We got regular giveaways, community events, and so much more waiting for you, so come hang out with the fam. Now, as an honorable mention for the keystones, we have Fleet Footwork. This rune is extremely undervalued, and a lot of people don't really pay attention to it simply for the fact that it does not increase your direct damage. However, rather than increasing your damage, it helps you sustain through lane, which will grant you access to more gold and experience. With those, you can hit item breakpoints earlier than usual in specific matchups, and therefore won't lose too much agency in the late game. So here's our tier list for the rune keystones. Now, after making the choice for our keystone runes, we're now going to take a look at the first minor runes. For solo queue, Brutal appears to be one of the most consistent runes for forcing advantages through lane. The bonus stats of it may allow you to win early trades that snowball into enormous advantages, but with that said, even if you aren't winning, Brutal is still better than Gathering Storm up until 9 minutes have passed. By the time the in-game timer hits the 9th minute mark, Gathering Storm provides more adaptive stats than Brutal and becomes better every 3 minutes afterwards. But before that, it is significantly weaker, so you need to make a decision. Since solo queue is a very chaotic environment where a lot of variables outside of your influence determine a game state, you gotta determine if it's a good idea to go for that kind of scaling. In competitive, it would be an entirely different argument, but in solo queue, it feels like a huge gamble with a lot of risk and little return. Also within the first minor runes, there's a greatly undervalued one, and that's called Vampirism. It grants you either lifesteal or spell vamp on top of extra adaptive stats, plus an increased vamp effect for every unique takedown. Fully stacked, we'd be getting either 7% physical or magical vamp paired with 10 bonus AD or 20 ability power. You can think of this rune as a snowball rune that helps our item builds that usually don't feature as much healing. Nevertheless, you want to be aware that this rune starts off very slow and only ramps up in power as you participate in unique takedowns. Consequently, you're then forced to adjust your gameplay to this rune to some extent. Let's take a quick break to take a look at our question of the day. Which rune out of all of the runes do you think is the best, and how so? For me, it's actually a minor rune from the Resolve tree, but I'm not going to tell you which one, at least not yet. But whatever you're thinking, let me know in the comments down below. Now, an overall great domination rune is Weakness. Any kind of slow or immobilization marks the target, and while marked, they gain 5% increased damage. This rune is absolutely nuts, as it's a budget version of the champion rune without its drawback. Normally, this rune is taken by support characters just to make sure that their teammates are dealing the most damage possible. However, you don't have to take it only on a support champ. Other champions like Varus can also take it simply due to the way that his kit works. So here's the tier list for our minor 1 runes. Now let's move over to the new minor resolve runes, and oh man, these are amazing, with the exception of bone plating. So let's talk about that one first. In theory, bone plating sounds nice, right? You take less damage from subsequent attacks, but what if the enemy just procs it and backs off? Well, then it's a 45-second cooldown that provides 0 value at all. If you think about it this way, the rune's value, at least in lane, depends entirely on the enemy being bad rather than you being better. To make bone plating more attractive, it needs changes to its cooldown or its core mechanic. But in its current state, it's definitely more of a bait than anything else. However, the rune can still provide value in some circumstances. For example, on junglers. As junglers aren't interacting with champions as frequently as laners do, they can pick up this rune to skew the isolated jungle matchup. Another example of it having value would be playing against a very combo-centric champion that cannot proc it for free without all-inning. But now it's on you to not lose it prior to the all-in to remain safe in case of an emergency. So now that we've essentially thrown bone plating out of the picture, we can dedicate our time to the good runes in the resolve tree. Let's start with the most broken one, Second Wind. This rune's appearance has a major impact over how the game is played. Prior to its release, we had access to the regeneration rune that healed us for a percentage of either missing HP or mana every few seconds. This rune, on the other hand, grants us base health regen and extra healing depending on our missing HP once we took damage from the enemy champion. Remember the Garen nerfs? Yeah, they definitely did a lot to hurt him and weren't just placebo nerfs. Better yet, with the release of Second Wind, Garen has become an even better champion now. For the early stages of the lane, he just shoves in the wave and trades with Grasp of the Undying procs. As the lane goes on, he's able to take trades that seem really unfavorable, but thanks to his passive and Second Wind, he can heal up real fast and then repeat the same process until it's possible for him to kill you with his ultimate. Oh, and also a little known fact, Second Wind is actually doubled for melee champions. So hop into a game, pick up that rune, and see for yourself how unbalanced it is. And our next rune is one that especially AD carries are going to like, Adaptive Carapace, formerly named Spirit Walker. It's been changed, and the slow resist was taken away for additional defensive stats once you're below 50% HP. Especially with items like Infinity Orb, those additional points of magic resistance can absolutely make the difference. We're glad to see that this bonus doesn't activate at 35%, but rather at 50%. This way, it's offering a bit more counterplay to Infinity Orb's absurd passive and helps carries to stay alive in vital situations. Even better is the change to Maw of Malmortius in terms of its price tag and MR value. However, it would be very appreciated to see a change to its passive as well when it comes to the activation threshold. Nevertheless, with the introduction of Carapace, Riot made a huge step forward in terms of helping out carries in need. Now, similar to the Gathering Storm rune, conditioning provides value over time that bolsters a champion's defense. However, if we look at the available alternatives, then why would we ever consider taking anything else but Adaptive Carapace and Second Wind? Seems like the other runes aren't even close to them in terms of value, so they're just not worth taking. So here's a tier list for our minor 2 runes. And last but not least, we have the Inspiration runes. We've seen a major change as to how Mastermind works, and even though it was a significant nerf, it's still by far the best rune for all junglers and debatably for split-pushing Baron laners. Prior to its nerf, it was just too potent in terms of granting experience and bonus damage to towers. So consequently, it needed to get nerfed back a bit just to get into line with the other runes. Nonetheless, this rune still provides great value for Trinity Force abusers by granting them additional value in their split-pushing adventures. For laners, we have a rune that is always valuable. By taking Sweet Tooth, we're increasing the healing from Honey Fruit on top of that it's also going to grant us extra gold per fruit that we eat. Whenever you're unsure about what inspiration rune to take, just default to Sweet Tooth unless you're a support or jungler. Regardless of anything that happens in the game, it will definitely improve your power in lane and therefore grant you a reliable shot at finding footing in the game. Don't forget, in solo queue, latency phase matters a lot in terms of snowballing, so if you get a huge lead in lane, it's really easy to transition that onto the map if you're paying close enough attention. Now remember the change from regeneration to Second Wind that we talked about earlier? With it losing its mana regen component, enchanters are now primarily focused into taking mana flow ban. Otherwise, their mana pool just isn't big enough to maintain subsequent spellcasting throughout the lane. Getting up to 300 mana from a rune is definitely not bad, and helps them save a lot of gold early on, which can then be used to empower their teammates instead. And to wrap up this list, we have our honorable mentions in terms of undervalued runes. Pathfinder grants a lot of bonus movement speed, which can be used to get plays faster than you're supposed to. This can seriously mess with the enemy's perception and also bait them into ganks that they weren't expecting. In addition to that, once you're out of combat, you might be able to run away from a few problems in an easier manner than you'd normally be able to. And the other honorable mention is Hunter Genius. This rune is helpful if you're planning on stomping your enemy and just want more stats to add insult to injury. Especially in ability haste starved builds, this rune can help out a lot as it opens up the way we're able to itemize. It's basically similar to the Vampirism rune. So here's the tier list for our minor 3 runes. And that's going to conclude today's video on our rune tier list. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked the list, let us know in the comments down below. And also, don't forget to answer our question of the day while you're there. Like the video, and also sub to the channel so you never miss our future content. That's it for today, so best of luck on the Rift, everybody. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.